Welcome to Channel 24. Trump rules out U.S. troops in Ukraine but suggests air support. President Donald Trump says American troops will not be sent to Ukraine under a peace deal with Russia. Instead, he suggested Washington could provide air support while European allies deploy personnel on the ground. Speaking to Fox News, Trump said European allies were prepared to deploy personnel, while Washington could help with things, especially probably in the air, he said. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that air support remains one of the options, stressing that while U.S. troops would not be stationed in Ukraine, Washington could still coordinate and offer other forms of security guarantees. Sky News reports U.S. involvement could range from supplying missile defense systems to enforcing a potential no-fly zone, though details remain unclear. The discussions come as preparations are underway for a possible meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Putin, with Geneva emerging as the most likely venue, but it also saying it could be in Hungary. European leaders have insisted that security guarantees for Ukraine must be established ahead of such talks. According to the Wall Street Journal, Washington and Europe have already agreed to form a working group led by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to develop long-term security guarantees for Kyiv.
We welcome this. We have been working toward it for a long time, and Europe is ready to do its part at all levels. Now is the time to accelerate our practical work to put in place a guarantee similar to NATO's Article 5 with continued United States engagement. The coalition of willing should remain closely involved in this process.
Putin is not ready for a possible meeting with Zelensky, despite the White House push, according to a CNN analysis. The Kremlin has downplayed the idea of a direct meeting between Russian dictator Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, despite the White House presenting it as the next logical step. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov mentioned only the possibility of raising the level of representatives, with no reference to the two leaders themselves. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told Russian state TV that Moscow does not refuse any formats, but insisted that meetings at the highest level must be prepared with utmost care, a diplomatic signal that Russia is not ready, actually. CNN notes this should come as no surprise. Putin has long denied Ukraine's sovereignty, calling it part of Russia's history and culture. Agreeing to meet Zelensky would mean acknowledging Ukraine's legitimacy, something hard to justify to Russians after years of propaganda painting Zelensky as a Nazi and Ukraine as a Western puppet. European leaders do not believe Donald Trump peace talks will succeed, but they still support them. Politico reports that Europe sees the negotiations as a way to test Vladimir Putin's intentions and, if necessary, to expose his bluff. French President Emmanuel Macron put it bluntly: Putin does not want peace, he wants Ukraine's capitulation. European diplomats share that view. One told Politico that if Putin shows he is unwilling to stop the war, it will push Trump to act and strengthen the case for tougher sanctions. Another diplomat said the talks will serve as a clear test for Russia's intentions, while new security guarantees now being developed should help Ukraine negotiate from a position of strength. Even Trump, after meeting both Putin and Zelensky, admitted, "We will find out about President Putin's intentions in the next few weeks. Maybe he does not want to make a peace deal." European capitals are already preparing for diplomacy to fail. A fresh package of sanctions is seen as the key tool of pressure if Moscow again tries to drag out the process. In Washington, Senator Lindsey Graham has warned that President Trump is ready to crush Russia's economy with sweeping sanctions if Vladimir Putin refuses to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Graham's bipartisan bill, backed by more than 80 senators, would slap tariffs up to 500% on countries importing Russian energy and uranium. He insists that US must be prepared to act if diplomacy fails. But the White House message is less forceful. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told US networks not to expect new energy sanctions anytime soon, though he left the door open. Analysts warn that the fresh penalties could raise global oil prices even as they cut into Moscow's war revenue. Axios noted the administration has floated measures against India, one of Russia's biggest buyers, but so far Trump has held back from delivering on his threats. Democrats, meanwhile, accused the president of easing pressure on Moscow, pointing to 6 months without new sanctions. They argue the delay is undermining US leverage, giving the Kremlin space to sustain its war effort with support from China and India. The result is a widening gap between Congress' appetite for a tougher action and administration reluctant to pull the trigger. Hungary has announced the resumption of Russian oil deliveries through the Druzhba pipeline after a temporary halt caused by an attack on Russian infrastructure. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó immediately blamed Ukraine for the disruption, despite the fact that Kyiv never confirmed involvement. He even thanked Moscow for quick repairs and warned Ukraine not to drag Hungary into this war, portraying Budapest once again as echoing Russian talking points. The announcement came just as Bloomberg reported that the US President Donald Trump personally phoned Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to demand answers on why Budapest continues to block Ukraine's EU accession talks. Orbán's government has repeatedly sided with Moscow, from opposing EU sanctions to securing cheap Russian oil and gas. While most of Europe is working to cut dependence on the Kremlin and strengthen Ukraine's position, Hungary keeps undermining unity, handing Moscow a political lifeline inside the EU. It's all for now. See you next time.